this calculation was a smart one in terms of ultimately what do we need to get this ticket across the line? And it's got to pull at the heartstrings of middle America. And as you started off the conversation, Tim, this guy is likable. He's likable. Yeah. And I think that in the main, as someone who has done a few campaigns over the years and worked with a few candidates and have had to match up people in races, I think this is going to work.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We've got Adam Schiff coming in a little bit, but first, my man, the chairman, former RNC chair, and Maryland Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, and host of the Michael Steele Podcast, which is now here on the Bulwark. One more thing, if you want to see Michael and other MSNBC hosts in person, they got a live event in New York, September 7th at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. Tickets are available now. What's up, Chairman? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's good to be in your house. How you doing, bro?
It's good to have you, and we're pumped to have the Michael Steele Podcast and the Bulwark.
It's been such a blessing.
Yeah, it's so good, and we're crushing on YouTube. It's just the people are coming. You know, we're putting out the honey, and the bees are coming. They're coming. They're circling us. They're buzzing. We are taping this mere minutes after Kamala Harris has announced she's chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her VP pick. So, that's going to marinate over the week. We'll have different thoughts, but I just want to kind of start here and just see what your initial thoughts are on the choice.
Look, it's a very interesting dynamic in a vice presidential selection process where there really was no such thing as a bad pick for her. Unlike what we saw play out on the Republican side, where there were good choices and bad choices that could be made. I think for the vice president, knowing her as I've gotten to know her over the years, and certainly knowing what this process requires, I think of all the folks at the table, this is the guy that she connected with the best. A little bit closer to the earth. He's a Minnesotan in so many ways, on so many levels. Hunter, grassroots kind of guy. Yes, he's got progressive views on some issues, but okay, so what? That gets washed out in the wash, as they say. At the end of the day, she's going to be making the calls on what policies are advocated by the administration. But she, I think, found somebody who can go out and take the fight directly to Donald Trump and JD Vance and make the case. I mean, remember, this is the guy who, in just in the course of a conversation, branded the entire Republican ticket and the MAGA party as weirdos. And that branding has stuck.
Chairman, you got to give Tim Walz credit for that. We got to give George W. Bush something. He was dropping shit back in 2016.
Fair point. Well, let's just say he learned from the best.
Okay.
But I think it's a good pick for her, and I think it'll work. Yeah, is there going to be noise about the summer of 2020 and the riots and the burned buildings under his watch? Sure, but I suspect that's something they've accounted for in this choice, unlike accounting for cat ladies by the Trump team, which was a lot easier thing to account for in that selection, but clearly they didn't.
Yeah. All right. I want to go through each of those things one by one, kind of his personality fit first, then we'll get into the ideology and maybe some of the baggage. The dude is affable. I do think there's a lot that comes to that, right? If you're Kamala Harris, this has been a whirlwind process.
Right.
And you got this guy coming in that's just cheery, that's happy. I think that matters. And I think the other part of his personality, I wrote on that he just, in some ways, there's this parallel to the Obama-Biden pick for me, where it's like, you got the top of the ticket. I'm interested in your take on this. You got somebody that's breaking a barrier at the top of the ticket. First black candidate, with Obama, now first black woman, also of South Asian descent. And it's like, we got to win over these white voters. Who is like the guy that looks the most like he eats at Arby's and knows how to fix my car, and can talk to folks down home. And I think that I think that psychologically that was appealing for them.
I agree. And look, you've got this sort of West Coast vibe about her, which obviously that's where she's from, that, doesn't necessarily translate across the country as you head towards the East Coast. And so you do need that sort of stabilizing force, which Joe Biden was for Barack Obama. As Republicans like to say back in the Barack Hussein Obama. And so you do look for the stabilizers in the relationship, just as Dick Cheney was a stabilizer for George Bush, Al Gore for Bill Clinton. A lot of times the conversation around a VP pick is, demographically and geographically, what do they bring to the ticket? But at the end of the day, it's who stabilizes the ticket. And that is something I think is going to be a very important skill set for Kamala as this campaign unfolds over the next 90 plus days. So, yeah, I think that's smart. I think it will play out well for her. It doesn't avoid the traps and the pitfalls that lie ahead. But I think, having that Arby sandwich and then going shooting, do a little duck hunting or just go hanging out on the back porch, I think he kind of stabilizes that aspect of Americana for her.
Yeah, he represented, some people might not know this, so his district in the House was southern rural Minnesota, so kind of like the Iowa border, right? Rochester down to a lot of the rural areas. It was a swing district. It's a Republican that represents the seat now. The last time he ran there, he only won by 2,500 votes. Experience in the Army, was a veteran, did veterans, was the football coach. Here's one other thing I think that they're going to try to play up. Let's take a listen to this pro tip from Tim Walz during his last campaign.
Hey everybody, Tim here. 11 days till the election, but it's my pro tip of the day out on the road. I got to show you this. This right here is the headlight harness on a 2014 Ford Edge. Ford, this is unacceptable. It burned out hot on the connector. So for $7.99 at Napa Auto Parts here in the city, you can replace this. Just clip off the back, use some shrink wrap connectors on there, tape it back together and put it back in. It's about a 5-minute fix and you're back on the road safe and sound. So pro tip of the day. Second one is get out and vote.
You spent a lot of time at Napa Auto Parts, Chairman?
I love that. That actually happened to me. I get it. Totally. I totally appreciate that pro tip. Who has that conversation so seamlessly and so effectively? And voters looking at that and authentically connecting to it. And so that's, look, the talent is clearly there as a politician, but I think the skill set to translate that for everyday voters who the choice is going to be made between Pennsylvania and Minnesota, Michigan, and places in the Midwest. At the end of the day, if you're not going with Josh Shapiro, all right, because he's going to deliver you Pennsylvania, who else can deliver you Pennsylvania? This guy, Tim Walz, will translate in Western Pennsylvania. And he will translate well in Western Pennsylvania, largely because of the thing you noted about his congressional district, its association and closeness to the people in Iowa and other parts of the Midwest that identify with that pro tip. Yeah. And so, I love it. And, Kamala Harris is not going to have, grease under her fingernails, nor should she, but her VP can. And he does. And I think that that's something that a lot of folks, particularly who are more Trump adjacent, not all in on MAGA, really suspicious about a second term, really bothered by the idea of Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, maybe a little question about Kamala, may feel a little bit better knowing that she's got someone who's grounded around her, who can keep her oriented and focused on what's happening in real America, where they have to be concerned about that pro tip versus other parts of the country.
Yeah, all right. So you mentioned Shapiro. So let's just talk about, I think, a fair worry that some people have about this choice. Walz ran in Minnesota in the midterm. He didn't like Steve Kornacki has a good analysis of this. He didn't actually really overperform that much in rural Minnesota. So again, he represented the district, so he has some experience there. But if you look at his governor race numbers, he didn't overperform in those districts as much as Josh Shapiro did. So that could have been as much about Josh Shapiro's opponent, campaign style. National campaigns are different than state campaigns. But it does, the word that kept coming up with some people who had concerns about this ticket for me, the phrase, it was missed opportunity. Do you feel that way? Like if Pennsylvania is really the key state here, Shapiro had proven it, Walz, the vibes seem good. It seems like it could be good, but Shapiro showed that Shapiro did it already. What do you feel about that?
I don't think it's a missed. Yeah, I don't think it's a missed opportunity. I think that's an overstatement. And I noted in a tweet this morning, shortly after the pick, that the Josh Shapiro hand wringing has already begun. All the little nervous Nellies about Josh Shapiro would have been the first ones critical of Josh Shapiro as a pick. So,
no, Chairman. I'm sorry. The Wall Street Journal editorial board and these guys weren't going to flip sides if she picked Josh Shapiro.
Like, all the money guys are sitting there going, "Oh, we like him," until they don't like him, right? And so, look, the reality of it is, no, I don't think that is as dispositive of anything more than anything else. In other words, I look at this selection. And I boil down to two questions. If you don't do Shapiro in Pennsylvania, then who gets you Pennsylvania? That's the bottom line, because Pennsylvania is still in play regardless. And so for whatever reasons and factors, and we know what a lot of them are. And look, this crazy coming out of JD Vance's mouth this morning about, Democrats being anti-Semitic, which is why they didn't pick Josh Shapiro. Well, then why didn't Donald Trump pick a Jew? So,
have the Republicans picked any Jewish people ever?
No, they ain't picked. No. Okay. So, let's not go down that road. The reality of it is there's a political calculation involved here. What do you give up if you pick Josh Shapiro? What other noise do you create for yourself that you now had quieted down, that you don't need to come back up from young voters out there that you're going to need in this coalition that you have to build? You don't need to have this fight in Michigan where you're already down, where you were down double digits in a state you should have been up double digits. So there are balances in the equation here that have to be accounted for. And it doesn't fit everybody's political recipe. This pick with Walz is the closest to filling all those little buckets that you need to get something in as part of your recipe to winning. He will help you in Pennsylvania. He will not hurt you. He's not Josh Shapiro, not like the guy who actually owns the home court, but he can play on that court just as effectively when necessary, as well as I think in other places in that sort of 7-bucket battleground state regime. So I'm not worried about that. I think this calculation was a smart one in terms of ultimately what do we need to get this ticket across the line? And it's got to pull at the heartstrings of middle America. And as you started off the conversation, Tim, this guy is likable. He's likable. Yeah. And he may help Kamala in areas where she's less likable. And I think that in the main, as someone who has done a few campaigns over the years and worked with a few candidates and have had to match up people in races, I think this is going to work. Yeah. Now, I'm happy to come back on in November and eat my words, but I think this is going to work.
I do. Affability and being a good pair matter. I kind of thought that she was going to do that. She was going to pick Bashir because they kind of knew each other better, but Walz has better candidate skills than Bashir. Okay, but we do real talk here. I know you do. So let's just here's the little nagging concern, the little guy in the back of my head. It's like, maybe this pick was about affability. Maybe it was about the, fixing car parts, rural Minnesota, that maybe it was like that they knew that it would look good at the convention at Will, telling his story, football coach, military, all that. Maybe teacher. Could be all of that. Maybe the left bullied her, though. Just maybe. Is it possible? Because there was a really aggressive campaign coming from the left, taking on Shapiro, and Shapiro alone, not Pete, who the left tried to take on in 2020, not Mark Kelly. It was a targeted effort by people on activists and a small number of politicians in the party. And is there just any reason to be worried? You think that she got a little, the heat?
No, are these the same people that took out Joe Biden?
No, different people. Totally different.
No, I would suspect. I was to say they're maybe different, but the same. The influence and the consequence was the same in that regard. I don't think that in the main that was the ultimate effect on this choice, was that there's somehow this progressive cabal led by Bernie Sanders, or, from the Republican perspective, George Soros, who is the demigod of evil for everything inside the Democratic Party. I don't buy that from the folks I've talked to and what I know inside the various tents that are camped outside the campaign, that played the way a lot of folks would like to write the narrative politically. Sure. There were other decisions and other aspects of this decision which were much more problematic than a progressive, assault on Josh Shapiro relative to Gaza and Palestine. It was a factor. There's no doubt about that. It is a consideration among other considerations. But, there's a totality of the narrative that you're going to roll out. And then there's the consequence of that narrative when people start picking it apart and chewing on it. And then you ask yourself, which one do you choke on as the candidate in the campaign? And you will choke less on this narrative than you will on some others. And so I think that at the end of the day, this pick for me, Tim, shows a level of wisdom that oftentimes gets lost when crunched up against other political realities and people panic and they overreact, in some cases underreact. I think that there was some wisdom here. And why I say that, because a lot of the headlines this morning also betray the fact that he was not who they thought would be the guy.
Right.
I mean, you had a lot of conversation, obviously, about Shapiro, a lot of conversation about Mark Kelly, some about Bashir, whom I liked as well. Walz was just kind of in the background. And it says a lot to me that someone had the wisdom, and I will give that credit to the vice president, as we should, because it was her pick, to look at this through a different lens and come to a different decision than what the insiders, who always know so much more about what you should do than you do.
All right. I want to do just two other things on Walz really quick, just on ideology. Sure. If he was in the middle of the caucus when he was in the House. As governor, though, he's had a pretty progressive record: universal free school meals, legal weed, carbon-free electricity by 2040, 12 weeks paid family leave, 12 weeks paid sick leave. And none of this stuff is socialism, but he went through a progressive tick list since he's been governor. But I want to listen. Here's Nancy Pelosi on Morning Joe this morning talking about her view of his ideology.
Tim Walz is wonderful. And she had many good choices among the six and certainly among the two. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. Let's say he served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans. Working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker, we made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credential, and he will do well in moral America.
Convinced? Not going to sell you? Are you worried about the progressive record and as governor?
I'm not. I think the progressives are aligned with this choice. I don't think that they're going to be outdone by it, and I don't think the fact that you support weed is a progressive issue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was going through the list. There's a lot of half the stuff I agree with. I'm just saying he took through. I didn't even make it through all of it. A lot of progressive. But
I know a whole lot of conservatives who smoke weed. So okay, there's that. So the reality of it is, we want to term certain issues a certain way, and he's going to have to address that. And I'm sure he's prepared to do that, and has already started to do so in some of his early responses. From weeks ago when his name popped up, his Jake Tapper conversation is a good example of his sort of, feeding kids lunch that's progressive. We sound stupid sometimes when we play this stuff back and start trying to put it in a bucket. I think conservative kids like to eat school lunch and breakfast too. So, because their mamas and daddies are on hard times. But that's what I think is going to be interesting, Tim, is that how much does this ticket reshape the way we talk about some of these issues with a guy like him in the conversation?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking to see play out. I mean, you and I have been in enough rooms along the spectrum of Republicans to know what's bullshit and what isn't, right? And appreciate the sort of finer edges of how people live out their lives. Now, I think some of that conversation between the two vice presidential campaigns, right? For example, the hillbilly versus the T-150 guy.
Yeah. I love the JD Vance. I feel I've failed as a podcast host by not bringing up the JD Vance contrast. Is so delicious. It's my favorite part of the pick.
Yes!
It's like this fake hillbilly who was a VC and went to Yale and lived outside of Dayton really when he grew up, and is doesn't have a single callus on his hands against Tim Walz. That's going to be delicious.
It's going to be delicious, and you're going to be all over that conversation. And I think that's what's going to be fun and interesting about how both of these campaigns prosecute their narratives to the middle of the country, because that's where this election is going to be won, and it's going to be won among 50 to 60,000 Americans who happen to decide the last week of the campaign who they're going to vote for.
Are you worried about the 2020 riot stuff coming up? That's my other worry. I only worry about stuff when I worry about how people are going to talk about it. Yeah. And I'm not sure yet. I have not heard the governor address that in this context. I've heard him address it in the context as governor during the time, which may or may not, cut the mustard, but yeah. As a vice presidential candidate, it'll be interesting to hear how they have that conversation. It will have to be addressed. Big parts of downtown burned under his watch, and so he's got to have a response to that because you've got folks out here already saying, with images of buildings on fire, this is what, Harris-Walz wants to bring to every city in America. Well, okay. That and a bucket of spit can put out the fire, right? I don't know. What are you telling me? So the reality of it is, yes, that is a concern. But again, I cannot help but think, Tim, that that going into this, and you don't have a response ready, you're not prepared to address that as a campaign or as a candidate, either presidential or vice presidential, then why did you pick him? Yeah.
If you know if that's going to be part of the conversation, if you were that deaf, dumb, and blind to it, then that says more about the choice than the actual choice. So I think that they're going to be ready for that. We know it's coming. It already is. I'm only curiously nervous because I have not seen it addressed in this new capacity yet. And so we'll see how they roll that out.
Yeah, he did activate 7,000 troops of the Minnesota National Guard, the largest deployment of the state's forces since World War II. So he did something, but he did something. We're not going back. That's the thing that mostly worries me. We're not going back. That's what she said. Right. So I don't want to just get bogged down in that. That worries me. Okay, final Tim Walz fact. Then I got one Trump thing for you. I'll let you go. Are you ready for this fast fact? Just brace yourself. Tim Walz is younger than Brad Pitt.
Damn. Damn.
Michael
Well,
Steele.
it says a lot about Hollywood makeup.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not doing that moisturizing that you and me are doing. I don't think up in Minnesota. He's got to find that moisturizer. All right, last thing I got to do this before we go. I'm surprising you with this. Yesterday, Donald Trump did an interview, a live stream, with this guy Adin Ross, who, if you don't know, God bless you. He's 23 years old. He's a MAGA live streamer. Most of his audience are teenage boys. We're gonna have to have a longer conversation about this, Chairman, at another date. We got to first prioritize this election, then we got to start talking about what's happening with the teen boys out there. I'm not going to play a clip from the interview with Trump because it was so boring. But just to get a sense for the idiocracy that we're heading to. This is Adin Ross earlier this year responding on his live stream to somebody calling him a fascist.
What does a fascist mean? It means you are a far right authorization ultra-analytic, oh my God, ultra-analyst, political ideology movement characterized by dictator leadership, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition. So I don't know what that means, bro. I swear to God. I don't know what the fuck a fascism is. I don't know what the fuck that is. Benito Mussolini and Giviante Gentile and Jason Stanley. Like, who the fuck are these people, bro? Never heard of my fucking life.
Oh my God.
That person got an exclusive interview with Donald Trump yesterday.
Yeah, so you just played that clip and you're good. I mean, you don't seriously. Okay. First off, damn, you dumb, bro. 23? Seriously. Woo! I do a Google, all right?
He was trying.
But start with Google pronunciations. Just start there. Just put the word in and have it, read it, say it back to you. So you know Mussolini, not muscle, whatever you were trying to say. Dude, seriously. And Donald Trump, but that tells you everything you need to know right there. The unseriousness of a guy like Donald Trump. It's all about the theatrics, the people who pour love onto him, no matter how damn dumb they are. Because, they obviously can't be smarter than him.
Boy, we're in a dark place. Hector Mountain Dew Camacho is going to be the president soon. I don't know, man. We got to beat these guys. That guy's going to be the Secretary of the Treasury in 2028 if we don't get our shit together, Chairman.
Tim with the mic drop.
All right. Michael Steele, go check out his podcast on the Bulwark Network. We're crushing it right now. We're so happy to have him in the family. Watch The Weekend. Go see him live if you want to be in New York on September 7th. I appreciate you, sir. We'll see you soon.
Love you, brother. Take care now.